Blue Ridge PBS and PBS Appalachia are proud to partner with the Virginia Department of Education to create and share resources to help parents understand some of the dangers and risks affecting their kids. Though gambling is now legal in Virginia, it remains off limits to children. But that hasn't stopped the exponential growth of teen gambling. We're pleased to collaborate with the Arnoldt Center for Investigative Journalism and Gray Television's Investigate TV to share the following story in hopes that Virginia parents can become aware of how to look for the warning signs of problematic gambling in their kids.
From Selection Sunday to opening day.
Let's go, Cardinals!
Whether you're watching athletes on ice or running routes, there's no doubt Americans are invested in sports. But for many, the game is just a little sweeter when there's money on the line. A recent study from the American Gaming Association says last year, U.S. fans legally bet more than $85 billion on sports. That's enough money to buy all 30 Major League Baseball franchises with cash left over. But that's not where it ends. The AGA estimates Americans spent another $63 billion on a big gamble, illegal sports betting.
I think that the illegal market is a concern for all of us.
It's a major concern for AGA's president and CEO, Bill Miller, because much of that money goes to unregulated sports books and offshore betting websites that offer none of the protections of legal sports gambling that's allowed in 36 states and D.C.
The offshore illegal websites don't care about age. They don't care about financial means. They certainly don't care about whether or not someone is betting too much for too long. And so it's more than frustrating.
It can be dangerous, especially because, as we've discovered, some of those taking their chances are underage kids finding a way to gamble underground using offshore websites. The illegal enterprise behind them is so veiled, it's hard to figure out who's running the sites, how many actually exist, and how they pick targets. Investigate TV and our partners at the Arnoldt Center for Investigative Journalism at Indiana University spent months digging into the problem that puts young people well below the legal gambling age at risk. We discovered high school and college students using sports books with questionable odds from offshore sites based in places like Antigua and Europe. Their web addresses end in AG or EU. Some we found specifically target their schools. Bets are placed through a network where students' friends and acquaintances serve as the bookies and agents who recruit underage bettors and then handle the wagers and payments. Silent backers often pay subscriptions for the offshore sites and hand out access codes when they're needed. They front the money to cover the book when people win and often allow bets on credit when they don't. Kids can win big, but they can also go bust. And when that happens, they can rack up debts bigger than a student loan payment.
It honestly felt so quick. It was like 3-4 days, $600. I got paid in cash. So I was like, wow, like this is crazy. But then obviously there's a downside to it because I didn't think of losing.
That quickly changed for this Indiana student who asked us not to reveal his name out of concern for his future. He says he began sports betting as a sophomore in high school. Didn't even have a driver's license, but was already laying down bets through an illegal book a friend brought him into. They bet together, but after their big payout was quickly lost, he says they were allowed to keep betting on credit.
So yeah, we went from going up $1,000 the first week. We ended up going down double that amount, and then we had to fork it over.
You don't have hundreds of dollars just laying around, so what happens when you go in the hole? What'd you have to do?
I had to put something up as collateral.
This student put up his laptop, something he says his parents quickly figured out and stepped in to remedy, with a classmate handling the transactions.
My dad ended up writing him a check for like $750, $800, which is like pretty gut-wrenching because in the moment I didn't think that would ever be the case from like a small stint like that. It's kind of a knife in the chest because it was tough to lose that much money.
It was painful enough to keep him out of sports betting for years until he was recruited into another book at IU.
So I'm in right here. This would be my free play balance if I were betting on the site.
While he's now old enough to legally gamble, he showed us a few popular offshore sites used by many underage students at the university. There was nothing here to verify. You didn't have to put in your age, your social security. They did nothing.
No. I would get information regarding, it would be like, this is your username, this is your password, this is your credit limit. There's 50 free play in the account if you want it, so go ahead.
But betting involving offshore sites is exactly what legal gaming advocates and lawmakers want to stop altogether.
Yeah, they make all the effort that they can to appear to be legitimate, but it's hard to go after them.
Dina Titus, the Democratic co-chair of the Congressional Gaming Caucus, wants the Department of Justice to have more tools in the fight against offshore sites. She joined dozens of lawmakers writing the DOJ this past summer, asking for a concerted effort to stop a thriving and unfettered illegal market, pointing out offshore sites can exploit children and young adults because they're not bound by age restrictions.
Some of the offshore companies are very appealing. They don't charge certain fees. They're very elaborate. They're very flashy. I can see how they go after young people with things that appeal to that market. Now, it's not just my concern, but the industry itself is concerned. Industry leaders like the AGA's Bill Miller say illegal operators have had a long head start on the game, so law enforcement needs to act swiftly and take stronger action against offshore sites that threaten the growing legal market. But it's not easy.
I know you can't talk about specific cases, but just generally, how hard is it to shut down these illegal offshore sites?
In generally, it's difficult to work this type of investigations because, like I said, they are operating legally a lot of times in their own jurisdiction. Having said that, we've had some successes.
Wins that have come through the FBI's Integrity in Sport and Gaming initiative, which focuses in part on tackling sports gambling by going after illegal operators. Supervisory agent Beto Quiroga and analyst Aaron Leifer say the problem has been on the agency's radar since the days of the corner bookie working with pen and paper, long before legal betting took off nationwide.
We're aware of the threat. We remain ahead of the threat and trying to learn and understand its scope and how it's growing. Now, the introduction of legalized operators has certainly changed the scope of the threat, but in no way do we feel like we've been behind the threat or we're still catching up.
Instead, they say the FBI is trying to get ahead by educating the public about the dangers associated with offshore sites, which the FBI says can end up funding things like drug trading and human trafficking.
One of the big things that we worry about is some users end up on these sites and don't even realize that they're on illegal gambling websites. It's very easy to end up on an illegal site and there's no warnings or indicators to the consumer or the user that that's where they are. We've seen a trend of criminal enterprise and activity associated with these sites. So we would be concerned about any individual, specifically someone underage, that may be getting involved and tied in with this type of thing. It's dangerous and it's concerning.
No one knows that better than the Indiana student who showed us how kids who can't legally bet are able to game the system through offshore sites. He says he'll place a casual legal bet occasionally, but now prefers the emotional roller coaster of simply watching sports to betting on them.
If you'd like more information about youth gambling or access to all of the materials contained in this work, visit arnoldtcenter.org or the Virginia Council on Problem Gambling at vcpg.net.